Amen. Okay. Tonight's a long one, so we're going to have to probably finish after mine. I'll do what we can. Perek Tesvav. Hilchos Isurei biah, Perek Tesvav. In the big book, we're on page 182. Over here, we're on page 468. 468. Oh, the bookmarks are over here. Okay. Page 182. 182. Hilchos Isurei biah, Perek Tesvav. We'll do as much as we can until Meyer. Then after Meyer, we'll finish the rest. Mr. Hashem. I'm going to record the whole thing. You can't finish the entire thing. I'll post it on the show WhatsApp chat. Ezo mamzer potato. What is when the Perek says the expression mamzer? What does that mean? It does not mean the guy you lent money to doesn't want to pay you back. That's a borrowed expression. What does the term mean when it says mamzer? Zehabam and erva. So someone has relations with an erva of prohibition of kares, and the child born from that union is a mamzer. The one issur when there's an issur kares, the child not a mamzer is a nida. Shaben ben a mamzer. A child from such a union is considered blemished, so to speak. It's like a stain. There's no ramifications of that. It's just considered a social stain or a spiritual stain rather, and he's not a mamzer. However, if someone has relations with any different arayos, whether it was intentional or forced, whether it was deliberate or it was accidental. Havad mamzer, the child is a mamzer, regardless of the cause of the union. So they could have been that, for example, there was a get and she got remarried. Then they found out one of the 18 wasn't Jewish or something like that, or the get was possible because the way it was written it wasn't kosher. Any of those causes makes a child a mamzer. Both males and females, they're also to marry into the collective Jewish people forever. It says even the 10th generation. Means forever. It doesn't mean the 10th generation is a problem. However, the 11th is permitted. That's not the case. For all eternity, the mamzer's descendants are mamzerim, and that never goes away.
It's not their fault. It's not his fault.
That's right. It's not his fault. I don't make the rules, man. I just follow them. Thanks. This is regardless of that the child is a mamzer. It's irrelevant if which parent is a mamzer. If it's a male. Now again, he's not allowed to marry a regular Jewish person. But if he does, now who can he marry? Who can a mamzer marry? We'll see soon. But if a mamzer marries or has relations, for whatever reason, with a female Jewish woman, or a Jewish man has relations with female mamzeres, it has to be
a fellow Jew to be for the child to be a mamzer.
Yeah, we'll see soon. So whether if a male or a female mamzer marries and has relations with a Jewish person, once there's relations after marriage, after kedushin, like in their chayav malchus. There's a law for a mamzer to marry the Jewish people. If the mamzer does marry into the Jewish people and they have relations, that's allowed. There's malchus involved. Chayav malchus. Kiddush le'bal, if he gives her kedushin,
only for the mamzer or for both parties?
No, for both.
The man and the woman.
I believe so. Yeah.
What if she doesn't know?
Well, any aveira that you don't know, anytime there's malchus, it means that there's a warning, and you disregard the warning, and you do the aveira.
It's apparent.
Yeah, that's a given. Right? That's the chal. Okay, so we're not in halach l'maisa. This is the Rambam. The Rambam goes over 4. We'll talk about that at a different time. Kiddush le'bal, if that. Yeah, sure. Right, Kiddush le'bal, if there's kedusha, he gives a kedusha, but there's no relation. If the kaddish, he gives a ring. Any like is not chayav malchus. Bal kiddush. Conversely, if he has relations, but he's not a kaddisher, einam like mishum mamzerus, then there's no malchus to mamzerus. There is malchus, probably, presumably according to Rambam, because of the other prohibition of promiscuity. A person who has relations with a Jewish person just out of promiscuity, no marriage, that's an issurais of the zayna that loytiya zayna b'nei Yisrael. But it's mamzeris. The malchus is only if there's first consecration, kedushin. He gives her a ring, for example, and then afterwards his relations. All the lavim of the Torah, all the prohibited relations. There's no case where you chayiv malchus for just having relations without actual marriage. The kohen gadol ba'almana. The only exception is a kohen gadol has relations with almana k'meish is bar. So the forbidden, he now, in other words, a Jewish person who has relations with a non-Jewish single girl, so that's malchus, but that's not a prohibited relationship per se. The action is prohibited. In terms of someone who you may not marry, and if you have relations with them without marrying them, you chayav malchus, despite the fact there's no marriage. The only case that applies is a kohen gadol who marries a widow. So if he has relations with the widow without marrying her, he's also chayav malchus. That's the exception. Any other case, there's only chayav malchus if you marry and then have relations as well. As we'll say in the laws that's discussed. Someone who divorces a woman, she marries someone else, and that marriage dissolves because he dies or divorces her, and he remarries her, and that's not allowed. Havlad kasher, the child from that second or third marriage, rather.
It's not allowed.
It's allowed. One of the no, it's a deraisa.
What
to remarry your divorcee after she has a marriage to somebody else in between. That's a machzor gushas. That's absolutely. Nevertheless, the vlad kasher, the child is permitted. Sure, ain't erva because that prohibition is not a chiv kara. It's not called an erva, just a regular law. If a non-Jewish man has relations with a Jewish woman, or a slave in Ebed Kanani has relations with a Jewish woman, how vlad kasher, the child is kasher. His father's not Jewish, but he's a regular Jew. Bein Penuya, if she's unmarried, Bein Eshish, or even if she's a married woman. Bein Eshish, whether she was forced or she was intentional. Even if she's a married woman, and if the man was a Jewish person, the child's a mamzer. If the father's a goy, according to the Rambam, the child's kosher. If a goy has, or a slave, kosher means he's a Jewish, exactly.
And he's not a mamzer.
Not a mamzer. He's
That's
not
the point.
Exactly, yeah. A goy or a slave who has relations with a female mamzer, how that mamzer, child's mamzer beside his mother. If a male mamzer has relations with a goyish woman, the child's a goy. The father's status is irrelevant. Therefore, because the father's status is irrelevant, because the mother's not Jewish, he's a regular goy. This guy, if he converts, he's a regular kosher ger. As any other ger. Let me finish Allah for a second. If the non-Jewish man has relations with a slave, with a slave, havlad eved, the child is a eved, regardless whether the father is Jewish or non-Jewish. Actually, the child's eved kanani. If he's freed, havad kash is a regular freed slave, as any other freed slave. Therefore, he can marry a Jewish woman. He has the status of a convert. His biological parents' mamzer status is irrelevant because there's no connection since he was not born initially a Jew or a complete Jew because he was a slave or a guy. I'm sorry, the question was what? No, the term Eved means Eved Kanani. When you say Eved Ivri, it's Eved Ivri. Yeah. Dalit. Zeh this is, I think I said Eved Kanani, right? Zeh this is the principle. A child who comes from either his father's a slave, or his father's a guy, or his mother's a slave woman, or his mother's a guy, he follows his mother's status. It's irrelevant what the father is. Therefore, if his mother's a guy, he's a guy. If his mother's a Jew, he's a Jew. His father is not relevant in terms of one of the parents being a
mamzer.
One of the parents being a goy or a slave. Yeah. Whenever we say Eved, it means Eved Kanani. A shidduch means a shidduch Kanani. That's right. If you say a Jewish slave woman, it's called an Amma Ivriya. That's a separate category. Eved Ivri and Amma Ivriya are a regular Jew. They're just employed status change. That's all. It's not relevant to their lineage. In Mashkich Alav, the father's status is not relevant. Feed Davazeh based on this. So let's clarify again. If the father's a goy or an Eved and the mother's Jewish, child's Jewish. Irrelevant what the father is. If the mother is a goy or a slave, the child is a slave, irrelevant what the father is. The feed Davazeh based on this, they permitted a mamzer to marry a slave woman. Here. They allowed a mamzer to marry a slave woman for the purpose of freeing the children, because this mamzer will marry the slave woman But his biological children are not considered his, but they are children biologically, and they are regular slaves. They are quasi-Jews, or Shif Kananim if they're females. And then he can free them. They come out as regular free converted Jews.
Not only that, but they undid their mom's
Exactly.
status.
In order not to prevent this possibility, 1 second. In order not to prevent the possibility, let me just finish that halacha. In order not to prevent this, they weren't geyser the prohibition of having relations with a mamzer, being a shivcha. In order, he has a way of purifying his biological children. So the mamzer acquires his female slave. He goes to Sudan or somewhere in the world where slavery exists. He buys a ship kananis. He marries her. Then the children are also belong to him monetarily, as his wife does.
This is a modern day solution.
Yeah, ask her up. Don't try this at home. But the concept exists.
I was taking notes. No.
Yeah, I'm saying the concept exists. So and then the children which are his, he frees them. Now they're regular converted kosher Jews. So
when he frees them, they become Jewish.
They are free slaves.
Right.
Are free slaves.
The Rambam's giving you a way out.
Eved Kanani who's free becomes a ger. His conversion. A conversion. His conversion process is complete. Good. In other words, essentially the isser of a yid being with a shivcha is ultimately we said again a isser d'rabbanan. Technically speaking, you want to get halachic. Okay, so a yid living with a non-Jewish woman, not as a married person, just as a one-time thing, is isser d'rabbanan. I'm going to tell you. Now it's very severe. We described how it's the worst possible thing. Fine. With a maid servant, it's the same status. So the Chamim didn't, and the Chum forbade it obviously. But when it comes
exception.
when it comes to a moms of the shivcha, they didn't apply it. This way has this trick of purifying the kids. Hey, someone who is a half slave and half free. So you have two business partners. They own a Evet Kanani. One of them frees him. The other one does not. Now he's half slave and half free. So he has both statuses together. She has relations with a married woman. That child, there's no way out of that. The patient sad mamzer, because he's half mamzer, because his mother was so his mother's a married woman. She has relations with somebody who, if it was a goy or a slave, the child's kosher. If it is a Jewish man, he's a mamzer. But the father was both Jewish and an evet. So he is considered a partial mamzer and partially kosher. He's a mamzer mitzad his father's Jewish status. He's kosher mitzad his father's non-Jewish status or slave status, rather.
When you have that concept of half mamzelis.
Over here.
Same way you have the
No, because once you say half mamzelis, he's full mamzelis.
No,
he's not half. The
full mamzer would be if his father was regular yid.
Right, but the mere fact that he's a child from a half source. So you're pinning on the child the fact that he's also mamzer. Oh,
so therefore the field also is shivcha. He can't marry a slave woman because he's a kosher Jew, part of him. The nimtzu bond of his children like him forever. If he ever has kids, they'll be in that status forever. The whole trick about marrying the slave woman, freeing the kids, that's not an option because he's a regular yid. The heter to marry a shivcha. Why the Chum did not apply this situation as well? The Chayr become bashful because it's not a common thing. Whatever the reason may be, but upon him, he's stuck. Now, if he marries a guy, no, so weiter. Oh no, so if he marries, right?
If he marries a guy, then the children are
but that's not allowed. Yeah, exactly. In theory, right? Exactly.
I mean, it's not marriage.
Right. So not married a guy, but he's with the guy. Good.
But their kids aren't mamzerim.
Marries a guy, the kids are going. Right. And if they convert, then if a guy has relations with a shivcha kananis who is a quasi Jew, the child is like his mother. He's an evet kanani. The evet should havel shabal shivcha avet chamazolis. We said this before, actually, in the short form in halacha gimel. An evet who evet kanani has relations with a regular non-Jewish woman. Where am I up to over here? Sorry. Oy evet chamazolis shabal avet chamazolis ben ascherin havad halacha chazaka. So again, if a guy has relations with a slave woman, or if excuse me, I'm sorry. Back up a second. Let me see. Mikvah. I'll say in a second.
Mikvah for what?
One second. Let's start again. A guy has ways with the shifcha who tell him the mikvah to become a quasi Jew. The process we said already yesterday's Perek, right? We said when you make the slave into a slave, you take her out of the status of a guy, you make her into a shifcha kananis, she goes to the mikvah. So her is eved. This child is considered eved like his mother.
Could she be a shifcha? Is there such a cap?
Oh yeah, we said there's a concept of having a guy in their goyish status if you buy them with that tonight. The Eved Shetaval and again the Eved Kanaini, who again he's not a goy because he's tayvel the shame Eved Kanaini, so he's a quasi Jew. He has relations with a non-Jewish woman. In either case, the child is sorry. So in that case, because the mother is a regular goy, the child's a goy. Exactly. Go after the mother. Thank you. Go after the mother. If a goy has relations with a slave woman, who is a goy because you bought her with the kalvana and with the deal that you're not going to convert her, you're going to keep her in her goyish status, and she has to, of course, keep the shav mitzvahs. Or again, you bought a male slave with the same condition, who's going to stay in his goyish status. In relation with the goyish non-Jewish woman. In either case, the child's not Jewish. But what's his status? In other words, what is he from this nation? Is he Amaleki? Is he Kanani? Is he a Chivi? That goes after the father's status. So even if, because the mother is considered like a regular non-Jewish woman, her employment status is the fact you own her. That's all. Therefore, when it comes to a guy in general, how do we know if this person is a father's from Amalek and the mother's from Canaan? What is he, Amalek or Canaan? You go after the father by the shaved, so to speak, like a better word, right? By the tribal status. Zion. Mamzer mutalisa begears. Who can a mamzer marry? He can marry a convert. A female mamzer can marry a ger. So it's interesting. Comes out a mamzer can marry a convert. A male ger. If he wants to marry a mamzer, he may. He can also marry a bas kohen, by the way. So he can the both statuses. We said in the previous halacha. We said in halacha aleph. It's looking back. Look at halacha aleph. But the labanim mamzerim and the children both unions are mamzerim. If one of the parents is mamzer, the child's mamzer. The child goes after whichever side is the less prestigious. Remember, it says the Kal Hashem, they cannot marry to the congregation of Hashem, so to speak. The congregation of converts, Kal Hashem is not considered the pasuk over here, Kal Hashem. Of course, Gerim are valid Yidden, of course, Chas Hashem otherwise. The point is that the unique status of lineage that applies to Kal Hashem is not restricted to them, and therefore the prohibition of a mamzer marrying into Kal Hashem does not apply to Ger. A mamzer may not marry into Kal Hashem. He may marry a convert, or she may marry a convert. Ches. A female convert who marries a ger and they have a child. So he's a kosher Jew. His mother's a convert. His father's a convert. Even though he was conceived and born after their convert and he's a full-fledged regular Jew, he's not a ger. He's allowed to marry a mamzeres, a female mamzer, according to the Rambam.
A fully Jewish man who was born to a ger geras?
According to the Rambam, yeah. And it's funny, the Rambam puts it in the status where the child's a male, he can marry a female mamzeres.
Because he's still not B'Kal Hashem.
Oh, so we'll see in a second. So, but the reverse, if she's a female to marry a mamzer, the Rambam's lashon implies that it only applies to a male child in this union, right? Marrying a female mamzeres. I'm not sure what that would be. It says at the end. Okay, the same thing applies to his children. So as long as it's known, unless until the reputation of being from converts is lost from him, at that stage in the game, that's when that generation becomes forbidden to marry mamzeres. So as long as the children of their descendants, it's known, it's let's say public knowledge that they are descendants from their original ancestors were both converts, they're permitted to marry mamzeres.
So if somebody today can trace his lineage back to
it has to be known. Has to be famous.
Be known by others.
It has to be common knowledge.
Someone says this is the son of Bagbag and Hehe.
So, well, if their wives were geared,
I'm saying like today, this is the great grandson of they have the family tree.
If it's common knowledge, how common.
Knows this.
Exactly. Yishtaq Hashem Gerusim means it's forgotten. It has to be like that forgotten. I don't know if it's every single person on earth. Because if it's forgotten for everybody, the halacha is not applied. You don't know that he's a ben gerim. The question doesn't arise: can he marry moms or not? So the chayr has to be some. I'm not sure exactly what the benchmark is.
It has to be forgotten by the public.
A bit pashtus. I'm not sure exactly how you.
Or you lost trace of the family
Yeah.
tree.
All right. Now again, if the parents
It's an
are
impossibility to test.
the chayra, I mean, unless we don't know, it doesn't. There's no limit. It doesn't say how exactly to.
My uncle Mordechai told me not to tell you. Like, if you ask him, you're
Right,
revealing.
right. Akaponim, whether it's a gerim or freed slaves and gerim are the same thing. The book is a convert. So again, if the ancestry is known that they come from a union of two gerim, if it's known, whatever known means, then they can marry mamzeres. Again, it sounds like it's talking about a male child marrying a female mamzer. The reverse is not the case for some reason. I don't know why. And so they can marry mamzeres.
So then, if you know, let's say from 10 generations back, that it was two gerim, that your whole family tree comes from, even though you lost trace of the other generations that lead up to you. The mere fact that you know all the way back then.
Yeah, as long as it's a yichus, it's Yedua, the McFarfeld family, they come from Gerim, whatever. So it's like, and then they can marry themselves. It's like a known thing. Test. Gershon also saw a ger marries a Jewish woman. A Yisrael Geras, or a Jewish man marries a female convert. Havod Yisrael Chodav, the child is Yisrael because one of his parents are a regular born Jew. But also Mamzeres, he may not marry mamzer. Good. Shloish Mamzer, there's three kinds of mamzer. Mamzer vade, a definite mamzer. Mamzer suffix, a doubtful mamzer. Mamzer with the safe, and a mamzer who's a mamzer from the Rabban, the Chacham decreed in his mamzer status. Ezo mamzer vade, what is a definite mamzer? Zesha bam this is somebody has relations with a definite erva. As we said, let's say, for example, a person has a relationship with their sister or mother or a married woman. That child is a mamzer, no questions. Mamzer suffix, a doubtful mamzer. Zesha bam is suffix erva. Someone has a relationship based on the erva that's a doubt. For example, a woman who has kedushin, she's a married woman or she's betrothed, but it's a doubtful state. There's certain situations we're not sure if it's a kosher kedushin, non-kosher. Is she married or not? She was given a divorce from her husband, but it's doubtful. Is it a kosher get or not kosher get? It's a suffix status. Here it's been anything like that. So in that case, she may be married, she may be not. Therefore, the child is maybe a mamzer, maybe not. There with the second husband. The difference say from the mamzer b'darbanon, for example, for a woman who hears her husband went off to fight in World War II and he died in the battlefield. She remarries. But turns out the husband shows up a year later in town. He's alive and well, and she's married to this other guy who she, of course, cannot be married to. So her husband's alive. So then the husband shows up in town. Now the din is, we say that of course she's really married to the first person. The second marriage is not legitimate, but public knowledge is she's married to the second person. So the Chum decreed that she's not allowed to go back to her first husband because it looks like she was divorced and remarried, and in between she married somebody else. That's not allowed. So she's also on the second husband, obviously married to her. She's a married woman, but she's also on her first husband. It's not Marasayim. It's not all the other exeris. And then her first, thank you so much. Yeah. The first husband now shows up and they get remarried, so to speak. In other words, they reestablish the original marriage that never dissolved and they have a child. That child is because the Chum forbade her from being with this first husband. So therefore, it looks like she had relations with a foreign person while married to the second husband. The truth is, she married to the first guy. This child married to her is fine. The Chum forbade him as many mamzer. Yeah. Exactly. It's that exactly right. And it's like it's as if the first husband divorced her and she married the second husband legitimately. The reverse is the truth. But the Rabbanon, that child's a mamzer. If you have a female, a single girl in the community, and she suddenly is showing very pregnant, they say to her, this child you have, who's the guy? Who's the father? If she says Ben Kashu, he's a kosher child, or he's selling Valti, and had a relationship with a Jewish person, she's believed. A kosher Jewish person is his father. I'm not telling you who. Trust me, he's a kosher Jewish person. She's believed. Ben Kashu, the child's kosher. We don't say maybe he's a mamzer. We don't say that. We say that the father was presumably someone who's kosher as she claims. So we'll see about exactly if it has to do with how many. Even though majority of the city is psulim, no. So even the majority is positive. If we ask her, and she can intelligently respond. She's not a 4-year-old. She responds and says that one of the minority people in the city who is a kosher yid is the father. Then obviously not a very big Jewish man. He had a relationship with her.
She doesn't want to give over the name. That's
right. That's right. It could be she got him drunk. Whatever it is. The point is that she's saying the yichus of the child is legitimate. She's trusted. Good base. What if we didn't have a chance to ask her till she died? Child was born, then she died in childbirth. She was a deaf mute. She was mute. She was a shaita. She couldn't answer the question legitimately. Where she says the plane where she says the father is this guy, he's a mamzer. Or the plane on this person who's a nas in that nation who Yeshua ben Nun was fooled by, and and they're considered the Gevanim, exactly the sin of the sinim. And that guy says, yeah, I'm the father. Suffolk mamzer. We say that he's a Suffolk mamzer. Just like she maybe had relations with this guy who she said she did. Maybe she had relations with somebody else. So therefore, if we can't ask her, we have to be worried the father's a mamzer. Maybe he's a mamzer, maybe he's not. And if she says he's this person, Chaim Yankel a mamzer, maybe he's the father, maybe he's not. Or because of a bunch of other things. Because the fact is that she made a relation with a lot of people, right? But this is called a shtuki. Someone who doesn't know, if you don't know who the father is called a shtuki. If a shtuki means he knows his mother. We know the mother. We don't know who the father is. He doesn't know who the father is. If he asks, "Who's my father?" they say, "Shh." So that's why it's called a shtuki. Be quiet. So therefore, he has all the chumras of a mamzer and the chumras of a regular Jew.
A rape situation could fall very well under this.
Yeah, right, exactly. You gimel, right? They drug her and she wakes up pregnant. I don't know who the father is. So the same thing, yeah. You gimel. A child who's in fact you find him in the street, right? With a note, please take care of this. Or no, so that's not an example. You find a child in the street, no one knows who he is. Who Anika Asufi is called an Asufi, which means gathered in, collected in the marketplace, right? He's a Suffolk mamzer. We don't know what's his status. We have no idea who this kid is, and therefore he is a Suffolk mamzer. Genetic testing in halacha is a whole other conversation. We'll talk about that at the time. Penuya Shazinsa. Again, a single non-Jewish, a single Jewish girl, non-married, who has relations with somebody. She says, and of course we see that she's expecting, and she says, Ben Zeh, Ben Plenu. He says, this child, the father is this guy by name. If that guy's a kosher Jew, Ben kosher, we believe in the child is kosher. But she's not believed to make him as his son, as a status in terms of requiring him to buy the Yerusha or anything else of that nature. But she is believed to say he's a kosher Jew if that person's kosher.
So he's not responsible for child care and whatever the situation.
Yeah, no, exactly, yeah. And will it seems to me that Ram says where we take her word seriously on doubt. We make this child forbidden to marry that person's daughters, for example. It might be his sisters, because maybe she's telling the truth. If that person's a mamzer, we don't trust to the extent making child a definite mamzer. He's a Suffolk mamzer. As a Suffolk mamzer, for example, he can't marry a vade mamzer. Maybe he's not a mamzer. So you have to put him in the status of doubt. He has both chumras. Tezvav. However, if a father and a son, and we have the assumption in town that they are father and son. And he says one day, Beniz a mamzer, this child of mine is really a mamzer. In other words, he's saying that he fathered him, but he's not saying he's not my child. He's saying he's my son, but he's a mamzer. Then he's believed. If his child already has children, he's not believed. The Torah only trusts the father to validate or determine his son's lineage. Shemar says he should acknowledge the firstborn son, the son of the wife he does not like. Meaning he dashing over here that he should identify him to others. The Torah trusts him regarding his son. So you believe to say your son is a mamzer or not, but your grandkids do not believe. Therefore, if he has kids already, his nemanis is no longer present. Tez Zayin. Just like he's believed to say this child of mine, he's the firstborn. He's believed to say mamzer, this child of mine is a mamzer. Ben Grusha, he's a child of a divorcee. He's a kohen, for example. He says this child of mine, he's the union of he's a result of the case if we didn't see the mother give birth. If we know for sure that she's the mother and she's not a grusha, that's not irrelevant. Over here, the father's in town. He has kids. Let's say he has a few wives, or he had previous wives we don't know about. He says this child of mine I'm a kohen. I married a divorcee. This child's a chol. Ben chulitza, or the child, a woman who I give chulitza to. So he's a chol min darabanan. If his wife is pregnant, and he says, now he's able to say, this pregnancy, it's not mine. He's a mamzer. That can make the child a mamzer vade. So the father is believed to say and establish the status of his children. Someone who says about himself that he is a mamzer, he's believed insofar as forbidding himself to marry a regular Jewish woman. Even though he says he's a mamzer, we don't let him go marry a female mamzer unless we know for sure he's a mamzer, because maybe he's saying I'm a mamzer because he wants to marry a mamzeres, and therefore he's lying. When he says he's a mamzer, he makes his children in the same status as him. But again, if he has grandkids, he's not believed to disqualify his grandchildren. Only disqualifies himself. In fact, it sounds like he cannot disqualify even his children. So he can only disqualify his kids when he has no grandkids. Once he has grandkids, his belief to disqualify his children falls away, apparently.
The kids became why? Because by extension, you would therefore disqualify.
Yeah.
The kids become legitimate if the grandkids are born.
No, in other words, because the Torah only gives him, the Torah says, "B'cher b'nas nua yakir." He should recognize and acknowledge to himself and to others, determine the status of his children. But that's only relevant to his children. Once his children have their own children, he no longer has that authority.
Retroactively, or which one?
No, the once he says that he's a mamzer, his kid's a mamzer, and then becomes a mamzer, 10 years later his kid has kids, those kids are mamzer also. No, yeah, not. Yeah.
They have the kids. That kids have to have been born. His grandchildren.
Right.
Which means that even if it's true that his son is a mamzer, we don't pay attention to that statement. That's the point.
Well, we don't know the truth. If we knew the truth,
we know the father's not lying, but the grandchildren are already born.
He's asking a Shiloh, what's if there was some verifiable clarification?
Over here the only thing we have to go on is the father's word. That's the verse. That's the verse.
Okay.
That's the verse.
Because if the father really has
proof, that's a whole other story.
The Metzias itself actually becomes the fact.
Yeah, right.
The Metzias gets determined by the father.
Right, exactly. In other words, the status, not the Metzias, the status. Yeah, design. Yeah. A woman who, remember, you have two stages of marriage: kedushin and nisuyin, betrothal and marriage. Right? She was betrothed. Now she's waiting for the chuppah. Today we do it together once, but back then they waited a year, and she becomes pregnant while she's waiting to get married. Who's the father? The child is a mamzer because
she has misa also.
No, that's if it's in Manasra. One day she starts showing. Who's the father? Unless it's the husband, unless it's the Mukadeshes, the man, kid's a mamzer. She's a married woman, right? But also Bas Yisrael, and that child is not allowed to marry a Jewish woman because he's presumed a mamzer. But for us, the child cannot marry mamzer either. Why? Because maybe she had relations with her actual husband. Now that's not allowed, but the child's not a mamzer, right? You can't have a relationship with your husband until the chuppah. But she did before. Child's kosher.
That's not considered a bias?
No, not at all. Not at all. It's just that abundant. If it's not considered a bias, when she has a relationship with her actual husband to be. No.
With her actual husband to be.
No, yeah, sure not. However, if we investigate her, we say, and she says, the pregnancy is from my own husband, my betrothed. Then she's believed. The child's kosher. However, if the Oris is around still to contradict her, and he says, I never had a relationship with her, I behaved myself. In that case, she's not believed. If he contradicts her, the child's a mamzer. So if he's not around to ask, or he died, for example, or he's overseas, no, he's overseas, it's obviously the child's a mamzer. He's not around to, he dies, so she's believed. But if he contradicts her, then she's not believed. The reason why he's believed to say, what are you talking about? It's not true. I never touched her. Because even if we knew that he was his child, as far as we presumed, the chazaka, then he turned around and he said, but he's a mamzer, his child's a mamzer. Then when he's believed, so if he's believed regarding the child's status, if he's presumed to be his child, he's believed to say, I'm not the father. The woman is not considered, but even though he's saying, I never had relations with her, she's saying, yes, you did. The child's from you. She's not the cheskas zayna. In other words, a woman who had a forbidden relationship would make sure forbidden to a kohen forever. That's not the case. She believed to say, I had relations with my betrothed, and she's not a zayna. And therefore, if he dies, if she marries a kohen, she doesn't have to get divorced. It sounds like from the roundabout that the chila she should marry a kohen anyways, but she's not a zayna per se, which is why she's allowed to stay married to him if they do get married. With other men who are kosher, and the child from this kohen are kosher, we don't say maybe the child's a cholo. Maybe the kuna status is in doubt. That's not the case. She's believed on her end to say that I had relations with my betrothed and child's kosher. And he's believed to say never happened, and therefore he's not paying the child support, like you said, right? If people were gossiping about her, insistently, while she is in Kudeshes, and they're gossiping that she's fooling around with her own husband to be, her betrothed, and with some other people, even though we can presume that her husband to be had relations with her while she's in her father's house, the child still suffered mom. Why? Just like she was careless and had relations with her arusa before the chuppah, she also had relations with other people. And if the father is somebody else besides her arusa, her betrothed, the child's a mamzer. But again, if she's investigating, and she says, "Uber zeh marusi, this child is from my betrothed," as you said in the previous halacha, he's a kosher child's kosher. Who said because she's believed to say that she was with the others.
It's stronger than just she said. Usually that sounds like a process.
Yeah, she was questioned. Right, very true.
That's like
So-
Bdika some Kikiris, like
So the idea is it has
It's
to be
more reliable than just
a formal questioning status.
like the 7
A former
questions, like
inter-
going through the.
I don't know exactly if these has to hold it. What time it happened, where it happened. I'm not sure if that's the case. Pashas, yeah.
There's a siyata d'shmaya. So her word itself is suspect.
Good. Okay. So I hear you test. A married woman is pregnant. She says, I tell you a secret. This child I'm expecting, not for my husband. If suddenly she's not believed to pass the child. But the child is considered kosher. Because who does the Torah believe to change the status or determine the status? The father and the father alone. The father says, is not my son. Let's say the husband was overseas on a business trip for 2 years. And obviously it has mamzer, in that case, child's a mamzer, because the father is obviously not the legitimate one. But if she says, what if the married woman says, yeah, my husband's overseas, this child is not his, and who's the father? Some guy. Have that kosher, the child's kosher. Because remember, a married woman who fathers a child through a guy, the child's not a mamzer according to the Rambam. Because the husband can contradict her, he's overseas. So she's believed to say the child is a mamzer, and the child is the father of a guy, and that means that the child's kosher. How long can you suspect the possibility of this child being the father's son? 12 months is the maximum. If he's been out of town for 12 months in a day, this is not his kid. The maximum possibility is 12 months. A mad woman that there's a rumor that she was being promiscuous under her husband. Everyone is gossiping about it. We don't suspect that her children are mamzerim. When she's married after chuppah, majority of the relationship are with the husband, and therefore she's obviously not the best person, but the children are kosher. You can marry her children, her daughter. He asked if she herself, if the husband, let's say, for example, dies. Maybe she's taka zayna who had relations with other people she's not allowed to. Therefore, she may not marry a kohen. However, if she was extremely promiscuous, you have to be worried. Even the Gemara and Simmer and Saita. We're gonna have it later on in the Saita Daf Chav Zayin, I think apparently. So then, even for children with chayshim, maybe she's really, promiscuous, and her kids are a status of mamzerim. We'll finish after marriage.